We are recording this meeting because I know a lot of people will want to see this afterwards. Hopefully it'll be very useful. We'll also be sending the slides out afterwards for your reference. Let's go to the agenda to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to do a quick introduction to Solar One, the HPD's Sustainability Solar Where Feasible program, and the basics of solar, how this involves, how it connects with Local Law 92 and 94. We will then talk a good amount about our solar feasibility analysis, which we've spent a lot of time trying to make more user-friendly, more accurate, and easier to get to assigned solar feasibility analysis. Then we'll have some tips on the feasibility analysis in practice, and then talk about the process and some useful information about the phase out of the Solar Where Feasible program for new construction projects, and what happens with solar afterwards. And then we'll have a Q&A, and if people want to stay on longer, we have a little interactive project as well if we have time. So let's get started with a couple introductions. If everyone can put in the chat if you've ever attended one of these trainings before, and how familiar you are with solar at all. So on a scale of 1 to 5. So you could do like a comma between these answers. So you could say, yes, I've attended a feasibility training. I'm at a scale of 3, and I work with new construction buildings primarily. And that would just be really useful for us to have a sense of who's on this training and how we can tailor our information to your needs. And maybe while we're doing that, I can introduce Solar One, which I think is the next slide. Oh, no, maybe we put it in the other order. Sorry about that. So I'll introduce solar then, we'll put it that way. And then we can go through and look at what people's answers are. But it seems like a bunch of people are new-ish to solar. So to give a quick rundown of how it works, solar energy is produced by solar panels that are usually on rooftops. They convert the sunlight into solar energy, which is electricity. That electricity goes down through wires to the inverter, which is a box that converts the energy from direct current DC power into AC power, which is what we use in our buildings. Once it's AC power, it's metered by Con Edison, by the utility, and that meter checks how much energy is being used by the building. But if solar is offsetting that usage, then that doesn't count. It reduces the total usage. And if ever there's more solar energy being produced at any moment than is being consumed by the building, then that energy goes out to the grid and is used by other buildings, and you get credited for that. So it's essentially like the meter running backwards. So it runs forwards when you're consuming energy, and then backwards when you're using energy, and backwards when you're producing energy. And so that reduces your bill. So over the course of the day, you might have a lot of production during the middle of the day when there's not that much going on in the building, and then very little production at the end of the day. So you have the meter running backwards during the middle of the day, and then you use up those credits at night when the sun isn't shining, but people are home and turning their TVs on and running their washing machines. And over the course of the year, that also takes place. In the summer, there's a lot of sun and solar energy, and so you build up a bank of credits, and then in the winter you use up that bank that was created in the summer. So there's this nice wave throughout the course of the year as well. So some basics of solar technology, solar panels have a very long operating life. It's at least 25 years. Solar panels are warranted for 25 years in terms of their production. So if they don't produce as much energy as they're expected to in year 24, they'll replace your panel, which is very important. They're extremely low maintenance. They have no moving parts. Like I said, they have very long warranties, and they have online monitoring, so you can make sure that they're functioning as intended, just from an app on your phone or a website on the computer. They do require direct sunlight, so it's important for there to not to be shade from a taller building or roof obstructions, maybe a bulkhead. You don't want to put solar panels right up next to a parapet wall, for example, or trees if we interact with trees. But on buildings in New York City, that's less common. And they are grid connected, which means that it allows you to do that crediting, so you can generate the energy when you have it and then use the credits when you need it. But the downside is that it means that you don't have backup power if there's a blackout, because if the solar panels are connected to the grid, then if there's a outage, then the solar energy might send electricity down the wires while the linemen are trying to fix it, and you could electrocute someone. So it's a safety feature to turn the systems off when there's a blackout as well. So just keep in mind that it's not backup power that we're talking about here. It's mostly for saving money on electricity bills. There are three main types of solar panels or arrays that we see. There are ballasted arrays, which are just weighed down with blocks that there are no or very few mechanical attachments to the roof, so you can put them on many different types of roofs. They're very easy to install and generally pretty cheap. But as you can see, they take up a decent amount of space with space between the rows. The other option is a mechanically attached planar array. Sometimes people call it a shed array because it looks like a shed. These ones are attached to the structure of the roof and flashed with usually either the roofer themselves does it, or they get a roofing manufacturer approved method so that the roof warranty stays despite the penetrations. And then the other option is a canopy array, which is similar to a mechanically attached array, except it's raised 9 feet at least in the air so that you can walk underneath it. You can put anything you need to underneath it. It's more expensive, but it's also more versatile. So those are the options that people have when they're considering solar. So now I want to talk about the local laws 92 and 94. Can I get a quick poll check on how many people are familiar with local laws 92 and 94? Is this something that you know about? Yes. Okay, great. So you all know green roofs are solar on new roofs. So that means roofs that are either completely new or a new roof assembly, which is basically completely new. But until November of this year, Carly can move forward. Affordable housing has been exempt if the solar is financially infeasible. And so that's where the Solar Where Feasible program originally came about. This is expiring in November, so we'll talk about what that means later on. So Local Law 92 and 94, this nearly only applies to new construction buildings, but some substantial rehabs, if you're doing entire existing roof deck or the whole assembly is being replaced, then that applies as well. So the HPD solar where feasible mandate is to require solar feasibility analyses on all of the buildings, but only require solar installation when it's financially beneficial. So it's based on whether there's a payback period of 10 years or less. And when systems last for 25 to 30 years, a 10-year payback is definitely a good investment. So this is good because it saves buildings money on operating expenses. It reduces carbon emissions. It also reduces the city subsidy for these buildings so that you can underwrite to the solar savings and be able to do more rehab work that's necessary. And we provide these free technical resources to any owners and HPD staff and really anyone involved to help optimize solar and make sure that it's the right system for the right buildings and it's accessible to as many buildings as possible. So that's us. Here Comes Solar. We are a program of Solar One, which is an environmental education nonprofit, and we work to make solar accessible to high barrier sectors. So we work especially with affordable housing, multifamily housing, low income homeowners, and we do free technical assistance from the very beginning of a virtual site assessment to see if solar is even viable on a roof, all the way through solar installer selection and advocacy during installation if necessary. NYSERDA has funded our partnership with HPD. So the Solar Where Feasible program is funded by NYSERDA so that we can provide this free technical assistance to anyone who is now or has ever received HPD funding. Okay, so I'll pass it off to Carly to go over the details of the solar feasibility analysis.
Cool, thank you, Annika. So as Annika mentioned, HPD has the Solar Where Feasible program, and a really crucial component of this program is the solar feasibility analysis. It's a tool that can help you determine whether solar is going to be required, and it's also a tool that can help you really optimize your solar project and achieve the energy goals that you've set out for your project. So to start, this is a very small screenshot, so you don't have to read the text because we're going to go in one by one. But basically, there's inputs required by the applicant to submit a solar feasibility analysis. It's an Excel tool with multiple tabs, and the applicant needs to submit a completed analysis with inputs filled out on the building information tab, project information tab, roof layout tab. And if you do all those things, a results tab is going to be populated with a payback period, and then it gets submitted to us. Solar One takes a look at what you've submitted. We help to make sure that everything's filled out completely and accurately. And we really look into things to make sure that the incentives check out, that all the assumptions are as realistic as possible. And that gets sent to HPD for their review and approval. And ultimately, what you're going for is a signed HPD approval form, which is a PDF package. That's how you know that you've officially gotten approval from HPD. It changes from an Excel to a PDF. And there's three main components of the PDF. The first is this HPD solar approval form, which has the signature from the Sustainability Office, as well as the roof layout tab and the results tab. So starting off, when you download the tool from the HPD website, the first tab is the instructions and assumptions tab. It's lengthy, but it's very helpful for you to understand how to do the solar feasibility analysis and dive into what are the assumptions that are baked into the tool. So you can get a sense of the costs, the tax incentives with links, what estimates are used, what tariffs and the value of solar go into the calculations. So if you want to nerd out on solar, this is a good place to start. This is the project information tab. It's the first page that requires user inputs. So as you can see at the top, we're just looking for some basic project details. So what is the project name that HPD has assigned to you? What are the site addresses? What kind of construction is this? Is it a substantial rehabilitation or mod, gut, new construction? And something that's new is we want to know where your project is in terms of the design phase, so we can better understand just where you're at and what stage solar should be evaluated. There's also two questions about the number of buildings. The first one is about the number of buildings in the project. This means all the buildings, not just the ones that you want to propose solar for. And if you don't know how many buildings you want to propose solar for, or if at all, you can just leave this blank. We also want to know what condition the roof is in. This is really important because, like Annika said, solar has an operating life of 25 years or more. And so solar is really good for, solar is best installed on roofs that are in really good condition. We also want to know if the project includes like electrification or energy efficiency work that could affect solar. Like, is your electricity usage expected to go up or down? Is the roof going to change? We want you to share as much information as possible with us so that we have like an accurate solar feasibility analysis. This next question is mostly related to new construction projects. We want to know whether your project is subject to the DEP's Unified Stormwater Rule. And there's a hyperlink to learn more about that. The next section that I've highlighted is on agency approvals. We are interested in knowing whether the project is planning to include solar. And so you can click on the drop down and click the response based on the results. It also provides, the drop-down list will provide insight into the whether you must include solar or not. So if the payback period is over 10 years, maybe not. And then we have a question about whether the project is seeking an exemption letter from DOB for Local Law 92 or 94. So if your project is subject to Local Law 92 or 94 and you can't support more than 4 kilowatts of solar, or it's not financially feasible, then you will need a exemption letter. The next tab is the building information tab. All of these fields are necessary in order to generate results on the last tab. The first 3 lines are just automatically filled out from the previous tab. And then what we're trying to understand is more details about the project. So who's the owner? Like, is the owner of the building a for-profit entity, or is it a co-op or condo? We want to know details about the project. Pretty straightforward information. The input that's probably the least straightforward is estimated usable roof area for solar. We've actually dedicated a few slides later on in this presentation to go over how you determine this number. A helpful tip is that when you're hovering over these cells on Excel, little pop-out comments will show up, and those can help provide guidance about how to answer these inputs. This section is all about determining what incentives the project is eligible for. And as you can see, they're filled with hyperlinks. And so we want to know what incentives should be included in the results in this payback period. So starting with the solar tax credit, initially we just had a yes or no, but with our latest tool update, we have drop downs that say yes or no with justification. So if you do think that you are eligible for the federal solar tax credit, like what is the mechanism with which you're going to actually obtain it? For LIHTC projects, we would like to know whether it's a 4% or 9% project. And what we've seen is that for 4% deals, solar can be included in the eligible basis, but for 9% deals, typically solar cannot. Next is the project eligible for the New York City solar property tax abatement? For most HPD projects, it's no, and that's because a lot of projects that are going to HPD are going to apply for the Article 11 tax exemption or some other kind of exemption that will fully remove their property taxes. And so in that case, there's nothing to abate. So that's why we often see this input as no. But you should select yes if the building expects to pay some property taxes. That can help improve the payback period. We try to simplify the incentives eligibility section as much as possible, but they're a little bit difficult to understand and it differs by each building type. And so we've published 2 incentive resources on the HPD webpage, and I've linked them here. They really go into more depth about the incentives, eligibility, and how you can take them. The next section of the building information tab is all about electricity information. This helps us inform the metering configuration and the value of solar. So let's say you're a new construction project and you don't have electricity usage yet. You could use HDC's current maintenance and operating cost estimates. For this year, the estimate is like $200 a room per year. So what you're gonna do is select the your utility provider, typically Con Ed for New York City projects. And then we want to know what is the estimated annual electricity costs for the building, and then whether the building is master metered or an elevator building. So a master metered building is one that has a single electricity account for the whole building. And then a direct metered building has a common area account and then separate direct meters for each apartment unit. So most likely the building is not master metered, but if it is, select yes. And this table kind of shows how the building type and the tariff informs what the value of solar is. So that's why it's very important. If you have any questions about how to fill this section out or any of the sections, you could just email us at affordable@solar1.org. So this is the multiple buildings tab. It's exciting because prior to this tab being introduced, we had to receive like multiple submissions for multiple buildings under a single project. So let's say you have a cluster project with 10 buildings. What you're gonna do is fill out this tab with all the information about the project and about each building. Something to note is that this tab doesn't connect to the formulas. It's more of like an intake page because Solar One has to do some back-end portfolio analyses for the buildings. And so there's an extra step involved with multiple building projects, but this will help simplify and like streamline the process. The next tab that we have is advanced inputs. It's a hidden tab that you can open by pressing this orange button at the bottom of the building information tab. It opens up and it can be used to input specific information that you've pretty much confirmed about your project. So let's say you already have solar plans, designs, and costs. You could fill in fields that are confirmed. We ask that you only like include fields that you actually need and are confident in, because these fields override the assumptions in the tool. And so they're really meant to be used when like more concrete information is known. At any time, you could press clear advanced inputs and then the analysis will go back to the default. Another important tab is the roof layout tab. This is really helpful for us to get a sense of what you have planned for the roof. A lot of projects going to HPD might be getting roof work done, like a roof replacement. And what we want to see are roof plans, screenshots from Google Maps, renderings like this, and then comments just explaining what are the plans for the rooftop. Is anything going to change from what's existing? You should indicate to us if any mechanicals are going to be updated in location, any obstructions are going to change. If your building is really tall, like over 100 feet, and you're subject to local law 11, we'd love to see like the rigging equipment, because this helps us really understand what is realistic for solar on your rooftop. Yeah, so an example of what you could include is like, we're doing a raised canopy design and it's gonna go over the HVAC systems, or like there's a green roof on the north section. Sometimes roof plans are not easy to interpret, so any extra information that you can provide is really helpful to us. Okay, so as I mentioned, one of the inputs on the analysis is estimated usable roof area for solar. And according to local law 92 or 94, usable roof area for solar, which is also known as the sustainable roofing zone, is any contiguous area on the roof that's greater than 200 square feet, not obstructed by structures, mechanical equipment, etc., not used for fire pathways, and not used as recreational space that's integral to the principal use of the building. So what you do is you outline the sections and you add up the square footage, and whatever you add, whatever the sum is, you fill that in on the estimated usable roof area for solar. Now, I mentioned fire paths. Some tips about that are that fire paths need to be 6 feet. These are all rules from the FDNY. They need to be placed along street-facing sides of a building. Not only that, they need to be connected to all roof exits and run from the front to the back and side to side of the roof. So just you have to imagine that you're in the position of like the FDNY going to this building in an emergency. How are the firefighters going to get onto the roof and access it without any obstructions? Now, where possible, fire paths should be placed along the perimeter of the building, not just like cutting right through. It's efficient if they are placed in shaded areas of the roof, like along a bulkhead, and that allows us to really maximize the usable roof area for solar. A lot of people calculate the usable roof area for solar using like CAD and things like that, but a tip is that you can actually get the measurements with Google Maps. So when you go on Google Maps, you want to go type in an address of your building, go to satellite view, and then you right-click the map and you select measure distance. And then you're going to click the shape that you want to measure. And that shape's going to be like less than the exact perimeter to account for the fire paths. And then once you close the shape, you can get the total area, and that's what you'll input into the tool. So as you can see, we clicked along this perimeter, avoiding like the bulkhead and the 6-foot clear path. And then we got around 1,400 square feet, and that's what we would plug into the tool. Now, once all these tabs are filled out, the tool is going to push out the results tab. It tells you what the solar feasibility is. And something that's cool about this tab is you could toggle the inputs on or off, and you can immediately see how the payback period goes up or down. You could also like increase the usable roof area for solar and see how much more solar you could fit on your roof. So it's a really helpful activity to play around with the inputs and see what factors impact the payback period. Something to note on the results tab is there's this button where you can go to our intake page and upload the feasibility analysis when you're ready. And yeah, the main update from February is that we broke down the results page to be easier to interpret into these buckets. And we're looking forward to your feedback if you have any. We're always open. On the results tab, we have the projected system performance. So what is the estimated system size that can fit on your roof? How much can they produce in kilowatt hours per year? What does that mean for electricity savings in the first year? What level of the New York Sun incentive is this project eligible for? And what's the estimated dollar per watt? From there, you can look at the estimated upfront costs for the system. So the estimated total system cost is calculated by multiplying the system size in watts by the dollar per watt estimate. So 36,000 times 3.63 is this estimated total system cost. And the New York Sun incentive is calculated by multiplying the New York Sun level by the system size. And then there's a little equation here to show you how the estimated total system cost gets reduced by the New York Sun incentive, and that's the upfront cost estimate. That's how much is owed to the installer. And something about the New York Sun incentive is that it gets paid by NYSERDA to the installer at the end of the solar project's completion. The takeaway section tells you the IRR, the payback period, and the estimated lifetime net savings for the solar system. And then this available tax incentives box will show you what incentives were included in the analysis. So for this example, the federal tax credit, which is 30%, was included. And that amounts to $27K after the taxes due to state incentives, which is the New York Sun incentive. The way that you use these numbers, you subtract the year one electricity savings from the estimated maintenance and operating costs, and HPD is going to use that number for project underwriting. This upfront cost estimate needs to be used in the project budget, and the payback period is used to determine whether solar is required or not. If it's 10 years or less, solar is feasible and required. If it's over 10 years, it might not be required, but recommended if it's still a good solar project. Now I'll pass it back to Annika to go over a few tips about the solar feasibility analysis.
Great. And I see that we are getting some really good questions in the chat. We'll have a section for questions in just a moment. So we'll answer all of those so that they end up on the recording as well. So it's good to know where is a good place to put solar panels and how to configure a roof well. So the things that we're looking for when we're looking for favorable conditions are large contiguous areas for the roof, minimal shading, so not a ton of taller buildings, a new roof, like Carly mentioned, because solar panels have a long lifespan, a new roof is good. Generally, lower buildings are cheaper and easier, and that helps with the cost. And making sure that the obstructions, to the extent possible, are clustered in the north of a building so that they don't shade the solar panels. If they're in the south, then they produce more shade than if they're in the north. Some tips on the feasibility analysis. You should fill in all the fields, especially on the building inputs. If you have questions about it, you can always ask us at the affordable@solarone.org, and we can help you figure out what to put in each field. We encourage you to explore the different inputs and what that would mean for the feasibility. Maybe it makes more sense to do a canopy or a ballasted system, for example. Maybe it makes more sense to look into some of the different incentives that might be available. And please write as much as you can in the narrative sections. We have narratives on many of the pages, and the more we know about a project, the better we can provide assistance. We also encourage you to read the comments on the Excel sheet and the links that they link out to. There's a lot of really great information there. And at any point, you can email us. We're pretty good about responding to emails with questions, and happy to answer anything that comes up. Most importantly, if the project changes at any point throughout the process, you can always rerun the solar feasibility analysis. So we intend this to start at the very beginning and be a high level estimate at the outset. But if you learn more throughout the process, you can send in a new one. And that's why we added that extra line for the stage of the solar feasibility analysis. So we know, is this at closing? Is this at the initial scoping? Is this right before installation? And so it's very useful to be able to run it with as much new iterative information as you have. So it's useful to see some of the factors that might impact the feasibility. So for example, the property tax abatement. If you can take the property tax abatement, then you mark it as property tax abatement eligible, and that will reduce the payback period and increase the incentives you can get, make it a better financial investment. If you Include some tenant electricity costs, if that's something that applies for your building. You could have a larger system, which might have improved economics. It's possible it might also improve some of your tax credit options, so you can ask us about that. A canopy system will almost always increase the system size that you can get, but it's more expensive. A new construction system with a new construction project with 9% LIHTC will definitely improve the economics because the tax credit investor can take the tax credit on both the LIHTC and the solar tax credit. However, for 9%, that's not usually very common to be able to include solar in the basis. Buildings over 100 feet tend to have higher costs because of conduit and delivery costs. 4% LIHTC is also improves the project economics and is more likely to be possible than the 9% LIHTC. Master metering, as opposed to direct metering, it improves the or it changes the value of solar. So it means that you can put in a larger system, but it might not be as valuable as a system for a smaller walk-up building. If there's a co-op that's taking the federal solar tax credit or the state solar tax credit, the tax credit would be distributed to the shareholders. So you might not want to include that in the feasibility analysis, even if it's a real benefit for the people who are part of the building. And if it's in a historic district, that increases the cost. But if it's in a historic district and it's in a qualifying census tract, then there's also the historic tax credit, which is 20% of the system cost, and that can improve the payback as well. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but it's useful to know what the rubric is for choosing whether solar is required or recommended or not recommended. So if a project has a 10-year payback period or less, then it's required generally. If it's less than 15 years, but it has some of these benefits, then it's usually recommended. And if it has many benefits, then it's strongly recommended. If it's greater than 15 years, but it still has some benefits or multiple benefits, then it might be recommended. But we might also work with you to consider redesigning it to make it more cost effective. And if it's, over 20 years, we probably would never recommend it. If there are projects that are seeking a DOB exemption letter, first of all, we're going to note that this is only true for the next couple months. The exemption letter won't be available after July. But you would get that if it can't accommodate a 4-kilowatt system, or if it's financially infeasible by the 10-year payback period. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Yeah, let's go on to questions. The first question I saw in the chat was if ballasted systems are compliant with the building code requirement for wind load. I answered that in the chat. Yes, ballasted and mechanically attached planar systems and canopy systems, all solar systems, are required to withstand at least 110 mile per hour sustained winds, which is what's in the building code. So yes. Carly, did you want to take the next question? I think that was the condensing unit question by Monica.
Yes, I'm just reading it now. So with the condensing units of the HPD HCR required heat pump hot water system, there's usually only a little space left on the roof for solar panels. Solar canopies can't be installed due to the required clearance above these condensing units. So how do we approach this challenge where the condensing unit's location is directed by the piping and only small areas of the roof are available for solar, and we can't have solar canopy? That's a tough predicament. I think what I would respond to that is we're happy to take a look at the roof plan and like what are the planned mechanicals, and then we could try to be a little creative about our recommendations and where solar might fit. But it is true that unfortunately, when there's more obstructions on the roof, it reduces how much roof area is available for solar, and some mechanical equipment has certain like clearance requirements above it. So you can't just put a canopy above it unless it were like 25 feet. So that's definitely a challenge that we're seeing, and we're happy to take a look at your roof plan. You can send it to us at affordable@solarone.org, and we can try to make some recommendations. And then how is this tool applicable for affordable and supportive housing buildings that are funded only by HCR, by New York State? This tool can be used by like anyone and by affordable projects, affordable housing projects, and not. It's just tailored to HPD because it is a requirement of HPD's solar feasible mandate. And so let's say you have like a HCR project that's in New York City and you want to fill out this tool. You can do that. You could not fill out the HPD information and send it to us, and we can provide support to you that way. Something I'll note is that Solar One specifically provides technical assistance to projects that are located within the Con Edison territory. So I know HCR funds projects upstate, and so we might not be able to provide like our full technical assistance. And Annika, do you want to take Brian's question about 200 square feet?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the question is there a minimum distant dimension when calculating the 200 square feet? I don't think there's a specifically listed minimum length or width, but because you also need to have at least the capacity for a 4 kilowatt DC system, the minimum dimension is effectively the size of a solar panel. So I guess it's about 3 feet by 6 or 7 feet. So depending on how you orient the panels, those would be the minimum length or width. And the next question is solar hard costs are reimbursed by NYSERDA. How is this shown on the budget? Should there be a NYSERDA source in the capital stack? And this is something that we're working on creating a easier to understand document to explain for HPD. But the simplest way to describe it is that NYSERDA pays the solar installer. And so the amount that is included in the budget, the amount that the building is responsible for covering, is the post NYSERDA amount, and the solar installer is will receive that incentive directly.
Yeah, I see Ravi's question asking for an elaboration about the phase out of new construction, and we're going to touch on that in some of the next slides. Lisette's question about, can a ballasted roof support a green roof? That is there enough sun to keep it healthy? Monica, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So I wouldn't usually recommend a ballasted system and a green roof. You could do it where there's, a strip of solar panels and then a strip of green roof and then a strip of solar panels and a strip of green roof if you have a lot of space. I think actually the Javits Center has a really beautiful ballasted plus green roof if you can ever get a chance to go look at that. But more common is not that they're terribly common, but more common is a canopy system where you have the solar 9 to 10 feet in the air above the green roof. And if there's enough space between the panels and between the cells in the panels that you can get sunlight. We were just a couple weeks ago up on a canopy and green roof and the plants were doing really well in the springtime. So that was pretty great.
Brian's question, how many panels are needed typically to achieve the 4 kilowatt requirement? I just did quick math. I'm saying 10 panels because 4 kilowatts is 4,000 watts, and one panel is around 400 watts. So 4,000 divided by 400 is 10. So if you know the wattage of a panel that you're thinking about, you could just do 4,000 divided by that wattage. Okay, I think we answered most of them, and we have a few more slides to go through, so I'm going to go forward.
So feel
Okay,
free to keep adding questions to the chat. If you want, we can answer them at the end.
yeah. Now this section is just kind of closing the loop to provide more information about the review process. So starting with number one, like I said, the applicant is going to complete a solar feasibility analysis, and you upload that to our intake portal. If you have any questions, you can email us and we can help you get the analysis completed. And then it goes into number two, which is the Solar One review phase. So what we're doing, like I mentioned, is checking everything for accuracy as much as possible. And we might go back and forth with you about revisions that are needed. And we just get it to a point where it's ready to be sent to HPD for their review and approval. So once the analysis is sent to HPD, the HPD project manager and the sustainability unit is going to determine if solar is required or not. And they're going to generate a solar approval form, which is that PDF document. And in terms of a timeline, we estimate that typically HPD can turn around an approval form within 2 weeks of receiving a final and complete submission. And to reiterate, if it's 10 years or less, solar is required. If the payback's more than 10 years, it's not required, but in some cases it could be recommended. And finally, for underwriting, HPD is going to underwrite the solar project, accounting for its utility savings and incentives. And solar is underwritten at 80% for new construction projects and 50% for rehab projects. And this is connecting to Ravi's question. Since Local Law 92 or 94 is ending the affordable housing exemption on November 15th, HPD is no longer requiring solar feasibility analyses to be completed for new construction projects starting on July 1st, so in just less than 3 months. So HPD projects that have a PDF signed solar approval form before July 1st can submit this to DOB for a waiver until November 15th. This slide goes over the HPD solar technical requirements. So let's say that the project is indeed including solar in the project. This HPD solar feasible solar technical requirements document is on HPD's website, and it goes over all the standards required for the solar project, ranging from the installer that's selected, the equipment, and warranties. And now this slide is a very simplified version of the closing timeline, like what happens before and after and where solar fits into it. So I'll just go through it one by one. At the earliest point, we encourage you to design your project with solar feasibility in mind, and that's because you're going to have to submit a solar feasibility analysis. Depending on the results, let's say you do need to include solar, you incorporate it into the scope of work. A note is that Solar One can create a solar scope of work for you to help bid out solar under the GC. We're gonna release more information about that soon. Something important is that, like Annika mentioned, throughout the project, things change, the design might change, pricing might become more accurate, and what we encourage is to rerun the solar feasibility analysis to get a more accurate payback period, because let's say solar ends up being a lot more expensive than estimated, the payback period might still be under 10 years, and that's great, but if it's more, then you might want to reevaluate whether solar can be included in the project or not. And then the loan closes, solar contract is signed, and you install solar if that's planned. Want to highlight that throughout the process, and especially in this phase, it's really important for coordination amongst the trades, like particularly with the GC and the solar sub, the roofer, the facade person. Coordination is really key so that solar can be installed properly. And then let's say you didn't include solar in your project, but you had contingency and it becomes available. You could always contact us and we could see if it's possible to procure solar for your project. And then solar is installed and you get to realize savings for 25 years and up. And as always, we are available to provide free and comprehensive solar technical assistance to everyone. That includes like building owners, applicants, HPD project managers, and at any phase, like early on with IPNA, even through to construction. And this is the email that you want to contact and we'll support you. Annika, do you want to take this in the final thought?
Sure. Yeah, I'll finish us off. So in summary, the solar feasibility analysis should always include a fully filled out project information and building information pages, a roof plan for each building and notes on the roof plan. The solar approval form will take 2 weeks to be generated after we've got the completed analysis. So make sure that if there's back and forth between Solar One with questions and the applicant, then make sure to get those finished soon so that we then have 2 weeks to generate the approval form. HPD will, the HPD sustainability team will send the project team the final solar approval form. And projects with a 10-year payback period or less are considered feasible and are required. Projects with 11 to 15 years or other benefits are usually recommended. They can be included with permission, and above that are usually not recommended. The solar feasibility analysis is generally really useful to help optimize designs at any stage in the process. And we can always provide technical assistance throughout the process at any point. So we have a couple more questions. Luis asked, does HPD or NYSERDA require that a service contract is set up between the building ownership and a solar installer? Systems go offline more often than we'd like to think, and building operation teams are typically strained for resources and don't realize these systems go offline. It's a very good point. HPD does not currently require a service contract. They're not very common in the industry. Most solar installers don't offer them. But this is one of the reasons why buildings might prefer to do a third-party owned system like a PPA or something where they have a performance guarantee. And it's something that we're always looking at and trying to help people choose the best solution for their case. And I can also answer Jeffrey's question, is Solar One a New York City program or an independent company? We're an independent New York City nonprofit. So we focus on New York City. We're a nonprofit that works with HPD, funded by NYSERDA, to provide this technical assistance for free. Carly, do you want to answer Ravi's question?
Yeah. So Ravi's asking about if bulkheads are greater than 200 square feet and without much obstruction, should those also be counted towards sustainable roofing zone? I think no, right? Because bulkheads are considered obstructions. Is that interpreted
I
correctly?
don't think they have to be counted towards the sustainable roofing zone, but I think you can, in some cases, install solar on them. So it depends on what you want to do. And I want to commend Sol for answering Brian's question. Good listening. How many panels are needed to achieve the 4 kilowatt requirement? Depending on the wattage of the panels, if you have 400-watt panels, only 10 are needed. And I want to say, just personally, this is pretty cool because when I first started doing solar with HPD in 2017, the panels were I think like 295 watts usually. And so we've come a long way just in the scope of this one program. Thank you everyone for coming. We again are going to send this recording and the slides to everyone afterwards. Feel free to reach out to us in the email and to look at the webpage. There's a lot of really useful resources there, and we're always happy to help.